I didn't know if he was talking to us or to himself, but the way he said it sent chills down my arms. He looked tired, not physically, but like he was carrying the weight of something he couldn't escape. As the minutes passed, the bar stayed strangely quiet. No music, no conversations, just the faint hum of the old refrigerator and the occasional creak from the wooden counter. My friend kept glancing at the back room. I tried not to look, but it was hard not to. There was a strange feeling in the air, a pressure like something was waiting. When the door opened suddenly and a cold draft swept inside, all three of us looked up at once. But no one was there. The door had swung open on its own. The bartender didn't move for a long moment. Then he walked over slowly and closed it, locking it with a heavy click. He didn't explain. He didn't look at us. He just went back to the counter, wiping the same spot again and again, as though doing something familiar kept him from thinking about the door. My friend leaned closer. "Let's finish our drinks and get out of here," he whispered. I nodded. I didn't need convincing. The feeling, the heaviness, the noise, it all felt like the beginning of something I didn't want to witness. Something I didn't want to understand. But before we could leave, something happened that made everything worse. A glass fell off the counter. Not slipped. Not tipped. It dropped straight to the floor like someone had pushed it with force. The bartender didn't even flinch. He just closed his eyes for a moment as if expecting it. My friend jumped. I froze again, staring at the glass. It hadn't shattered. Somehow it landed upright, perfectly still on the wooden floor. Not even a crack. The bartender finally spoke in a low voice. "It doesn't like when people leave early." Those words sank into the room like cold water. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, quick and tight. My friend exchanged a look with me, a silent question neither of us wanted to ask. The bartender walked around the counter and picked up the untouched glass. His hands were steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way he avoided looking at the back of the bar. "Some stories aren't mine to tell," he said. "But if you're going to be here tonight, there's something you should know." He placed the glass on the table in front of us, leaning in slightly. "You came in on a quiet night. Too quiet. And quiet nights here, they never stay quiet. Not for long." My friend swallowed, glancing at the door again. "We don't want any trouble," he said carefully. The bartender gave a slow, tired nod. "I know. Trouble doesn't care." The lights flickered then, just once but enough to make my stomach twist. The bartender froze, staring at the ceiling like he knew exactly what it meant. My friend whispered, "Let's go. Now." We both stood up, ready to head for the door, but the bartender raised a hand. "I'm not stopping you," he said softly. "But if you walk out now, something might follow. It's happened before." We froze. The room felt impossibly quiet again, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing. The kind of quiet that feels wrong. The bartender's eyes softened, almost apologetic. "You should hear what happened here. What people have seen. What they try not to talk about. You might understand why leaving isn't always the safest choice." My friend sank back into his chair, unsure of what to do. I sat slowly, my hands trembling just a little, even if I tried to hide it. The bartender pulled up a chair and sat with us, lowering his voice as he leaned forward. "3 stories," he murmured. 3 nights people wish they could forget. All of them true. All of them happen right here, or in bars just like this one. And every single one begins the same way you two walked in tonight, thinking it was just another harmless stop. He paused, glancing once more at the shadows in the back. "You want to know what really happens after midnight in a place like this?" The air seemed to tighten around us. My friend exhaled shakily. I nodded slowly, though my heart was pounding. The bartender leaned closer. His voice was so low we had to silence every thought just to hear him. "Then listen carefully," he whispered. "Because once I start, you might not look at bars the same way again." He paused as if gathering himself, then began with the first story. And that's where the night truly changed. Because once he spoke the first words, something shifted in the room. Like the walls strained to hear. Like the shadows leaned closer. Like the air itself remembered everything he was about to say, and before he even finished the first story, before the tension in the room had time to settle, something happened behind us. Something none of us expected. Something that told me we shouldn't have stayed. Something that made me realize the night wasn't going to end quietly. Not for any of us. And whatever moved behind me in that moment, whatever brushed the air near my neck, whatever whispered low enough that only I heard it, it wasn't human. Not anymore. The sound behind me was so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A faint breath, like someone leaning close enough to whisper but not close enough to touch. I didn't turn around. Something deep inside me told me not to. My friend must have sensed it too because he stiffened in his seat, his eyes widening as he looked over my shoulder, then immediately looked away like he regretted it. The bartender's expression didn't change. That might have been the most unsettling part. He didn't flinch, didn't react. He only lowered his gaze to his hands, slow and steady, as though he had been expecting something to happen but didn't want to acknowledge it out loud. It was the way someone looks when they've learned to live with things they can't explain. My breath trembled as I forced myself to stay still. The room felt colder now, like someone had opened a window that wasn't really there. The bartender let out a tired sigh, the kind that said he didn't want to scare us more than we already were, but he also didn't want to lie. "This place remembers," he said quietly. "And sometimes, it reacts." I swallowed hard, trying to regain control of my voice. "What was that?" He shook his head. "Better not to turn around. Things like that fade quicker when you don't look at them." My friend leaned in, whispering sharply, "Why are we still sitting here?" The bartender didn't answer him. Instead, he looked at me, studying my face like he was trying to decide how much I was ready to hear. "You said you aren't from around here," he repeated. "Visitors feel it stronger. The air, the weight, the memories this place holds." He paused, then continued in a low, steady tone. "You ever walk into a room and suddenly feel like someone else had been there just a second before? Not a real person, something else. Something that didn't want to be forgotten." I didn't speak. My friend didn't either. The shadows in the back of the bar looked deeper now, almost like they were breathing. The bartender continued. "That corner." He nodded toward the far side of the room. "That's where it started for the man in the first story." I told him no one else was here, but he insisted he saw someone. Not clearly. Just the shape of a person. You know when you're half awake and you think someone is standing in your room, but when you turn the light on there's nothing there. He said it was like that. A shadow with weight. My friend rubbed his arms as if trying to shake off a cold breeze. "Maybe it was just the lighting," he muttered. "That's what I told him," the bartender said. "People see things when they're tired." But then he said the shadow moved. The three of us went silent again. Even the refrigerator behind the counter seemed to hum quieter. The bartender rubbed the back of his neck, remembering. He kept staring at that corner like he couldn't tear his eyes away. And the more he looked, the more unsettled he became. Not scared exactly, confused. Like his mind couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. He tapped his fingers gently on the table. He said it wasn't the shape that bothered him. It was the feeling. Like the shadow didn't want to be seen, but also didn't want him to look away. My stomach twisted again. My friend shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable but too afraid to interrupt. The bartender continued. So he tried to ignore it. Just sat there sipping his drink. But after a few minutes he heard something. A soft sound. A breath. The same way you just did. The hair on my arm stood on end. The bartender noticed, but he didn't stop the story. The man told me it felt like the room leaned toward him. Like the darkness in that corner grew heavier. And then he said he felt someone sit down beside him. Not touching him. Just there. My friend held his breath. "But I told you, no one else was here," the bartender said. He was the only customer that night. He glanced toward the dark corner again. Except whatever was in that spot. A faint tapping noise came from the back wall. A soft, slow rhythm. None of us moved. My pulse pounded in my ears. "What was it?" I whispered. The bartender didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch until it felt like the room itself was waiting. "No one knows," he finally said. The man didn't stay long enough to find out. He just stood up and walked out. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't finish his drink. He left like something was pushing him from the inside. The tapping stopped. And the next night, the bartender added quietly, someone else came in and sat in the same corner. Same experience. Same heaviness. Same presence. My friend shook his head. "So this place is, what? Haunted?" The bartender didn't flinch. "I never said that word." "Then what is it?" I asked. He stared at the table for a long moment, his voice turning almost too soft to hear. "Some bars don't just hold people," he said. "They hold moments, memories, energy. Things people leave behind when they're hurting, angry, lost. It builds up over time. Until it feels like something is still here long after the people are gone." He looked at me again, eyes serious. "And sometimes those things don't stay in the dark. Sometimes they move." I felt that cold brush behind me again, barely a breath, barely a stir, but real enough to make my hands tighten. The bartender leaned closer. You feel it, don't you? The way the air changes. The way the room listens. That means it's paying attention to you. My friend shook his head quickly, almost panicking. Okay, we're leaving. I'm not staying in here another second. He grabbed his jacket and stood up, but the bartender didn't move. He stayed seated, watching him calmly. You can try to leave, he said gently. But if the air follows you, you'll know. My friend swallowed hard, hesitating. What do you mean follows? The bartender didn't answer. He just sighed and looked toward the door again. Things are quieter when you understand the stories. When you know what this place has seen. Otherwise, you might walk out with something you didn't bring in. I didn't want to believe him, but the bar felt different now. Heavier. Like the shadows had crept just a little closer. My friend slowly sat back down. The bartender nodded, almost relieved. Good. Let the room settle before you make any choices. I glanced around. The lights flickered again, twice this time. The bartender's voice dropped. And the first story isn't even the worst one. A faint creak echoed from the back. But before I tell you the next part, he whispered, you need to know one more thing. He leaned in so close I could feel the warmth of his breath. You're not alone tonight. And you won't be, until it decides you should be. The room felt like it tightened, like something unseen shifted just out of sight. And something in the air exhaled. The air around us felt tighter, almost like someone had closed a door we didn't notice before. The bartender's words kept circling in my head, looping in a slow, steady echo that made the room feel smaller with every passing second. My friend sat stiffly beside me, his legs pulled in closer to the table, his breathing uneven. Even he, who rarely believed anything strange, felt the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't just fear anymore, there was something else building, something deeper, something that made the room feel alive in a way a bar shouldn't. I kept glancing toward the back corner, even though I knew I shouldn't. The shadows seemed thicker, like a soft cloud of darkness clinging to the edges of the wall. It reminded me of fog rolling across old streetlights, never in a hurry but somehow still intentional. The bartender followed my eyes and shook his head slowly. It always starts the same way, he said quietly. A feeling, a sound, a shift in the air that doesn't belong. That's how the second story began too. My friend muttered under his breath. Another story? You're serious with all this? The bartender gave a tired half-smile. I wish I wasn't. He leaned forward again, elbows resting on the table like he had something heavy to share but wasn't sure how to start. This one wasn't a visitor, he said. It happened to someone who worked here. My friend and I exchanged a quick look. Hearing about strangers was one thing. Hearing that something happened to someone who had no choice but to be here every night, that felt different. More real. She was a night shift worker, the bartender continued. Young. Always polite. Never complained. She knew every regular by name and everyone liked her. But she had this habit of staying late after closing. Said the quiet helped her think. He rubbed his thumb along the side of his glass. One night she stayed a little too long. The room grew still again. The tapping sound we heard earlier hadn't returned, but the silence felt heavier than noise ever could. She said she heard someone walking in when she was cleaning up. She assumed it was a customer who forgot something. But when she called out, no one answered. No footsteps. No movement. Just breathing. My friend shifted uncomfortably. Like what we heard? The bartender nodded once. Exactly like that. Soft. Close. Too close. He took a slow breath. She told me she didn't feel scared at first. She thought maybe she was imagining things because she was tired. But then she noticed something strange. Every time she tried to turn around, she felt like something tightened behind her. Like the air was pushing against her shoulders. She said it felt like a warning. I swallowed, trying to picture it without letting my imagination go too far. So she didn't turn around, he said. She just walked toward the front of the bar, slow and careful, like someone walking through a room full of things that might break. He nodded toward the door. She said the closer she got, the colder the air felt. Like something behind her didn't want her to leave. My friend rubbed his face trying to process it. Okay, but this could all just be stress. Or being alone late at night. That's when people hear things. The bartender didn't argue. He just continued. She reached the door, pulled it open, and stepped outside. But she didn't feel relieved. Not even for 1 second. She told me something followed her out. The air, she said, felt like it came with her. My stomach twisted. This was the same warning he gave us earlier. If we walked out now, something might follow. What happened to her? I asked. The bartender's eyes lowered. She quit the next morning. Said she couldn't stay here anymore. But she didn't say why, not in full. She just said that wherever she went after that night, her car, her apartment, even her family's house, she kept hearing the same breath. Always behind her. Always close. My friend went pale. You're telling us this because, what? You think staying here is safer? The bartender pressed his lips together. I'm saying the room knows you now. It's better to let it settle before you decide what to do next. The lights flickered again, longer this time. A soft hum rose from the corner, like a vibration buried beneath the floorboards. My friend gripped the edge of the table. This is insane, he whispered. The bartender didn't disagree. Maybe. Or maybe you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the room knows that. He glanced around slowly, almost nervously. There's something else I should tell you, he said. Something about this place. And you need to hear it. We waited. The bartender ran his fingers along the wood grain of the table, tracing small circles as if organizing his thoughts. This bar wasn't always like this, he began. Years ago it was quiet, normal, warm. People came in after work, celebrated birthdays, watched games. Nothing strange ever happened. He paused before continuing. Then someone went missing. A regular. Someone who always sat in that back corner. My chest tightened. The same corner? He nodded. Same one. He looked toward it again, and this time even he seemed hesitant. No one saw him leave. Not through the door. Not through the back. He was here, and then he wasn't. My friend whispered, maybe he walked out when no one noticed. That's what everyone said, the bartender replied. But there were things left behind. His coat. His wallet. Even his keys. Everything except him. He tapped the table softly. And that's when the feeling started. The heaviness. The shadows moving just a little more than they should. People hearing things when they were alone. Customers sitting down only to feel someone brush past them when no one was there. He lowered his voice. It was like the bar absorbed something that night. Something we haven't been able to explain. A soft thud came from the back room. All three of us froze. The bartender didn't move a muscle. He simply exhaled as if the sound confirmed something he already suspected. My friend looked like he was ready to run, but the bartender raised a hand gently, not as an order, more like a plea. Hold on, he said. There's another part to this. Another thud. This one lighter, like a chair leg being nudged across the floor. I forced myself not to look. The bartender leaned forward, lowering his voice even more. The man who vanished, he wasn't the only one who felt something in that corner. Before he disappeared, he told a few people that he thought someone was watching him. Not a real person. Something else. He said he kept seeing shapes move when he blinked. Shadows that stayed too long. And he heard the same breath you heard tonight. My pulse thumped in my ears. But here's the strange part, the bartender added. He wasn't afraid. He said the presence didn't feel dangerous at first. Just sat. Like something was trying to get his attention. The air grew colder. Then what changed? I asked. The bartender took a long, slow breath. He stopped talking about it. Right before he went missing. Like he finally understood what it wanted, and it wasn't attention. A soft whisper drifted across the room, too faint to understand but too real to ignore. My friend grabbed my arm. Please tell me that was the wind. The bartender stared at the corner. There's no wind in here. The room tensed again. The lights dimmed, not flickering, just lowering gently like someone was slowly twisting the switch. The bartender leaned in, eyes fixed on something past me. Whatever is in this place, he whispered, it's listening again. I didn't dare turn around, but I felt it, the weight behind me, the soft shift of air, the sense that something unseen had moved closer. And for the first time since we walked in, I felt it watching us. Not curious, not confused, not even angry, just waiting. As if the story wasn't finished yet, and we were already part of it. The bar grew colder with every passing second. I could feel the air thickening, pressing against my chest as if it were alive. My friend kept glancing toward the back corner, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his jacket, but neither of us dared move closer. The shadows there seemed to pulse, stretching slowly as if testing their limits, daring us to look directly. My heart thumped so loudly I could swear the bartender could hear it, but he didn't even flinch. He only watched us with that calm, tired gaze, like he'd already accepted whatever was coming. The whispering sound returned, soft, indistinct, but unmistakable. It came from the far corner, weaving through the quiet like smoke curling from a candle. I held my breath, straining to catch a single word, a single clue about what it wanted. It was impossible. The whisper had no language I recognized, no rhythm my mind could follow, yet it carried intent. The air seemed to bend toward it and the pressure behind me intensified. My friend's eyes were wide, his lips pressed together, and he gripped my arm like he needed physical reassurance that the room couldn't reach him. "Do you feel it?" he whispered, voice trembling. It's here." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. My throat had gone dry. I had felt the presence earlier, but now it wasn't subtle. It wasn't patient. It was pressing against us like a tide, threatening to sweep us away, and somehow it knew we were afraid. The bartender's voice cut through the tension, soft but urgent. "Don't move too fast," he said. "And don't look directly at it. That's how it catches attention." I swallowed hard. My eyes darted around the room looking for anything tangible, anything to ground myself. The tables, the chairs, the worn bar top. Nothing moved, nothing seemed unusual except the shadows, except the way the air felt heavier in the back. The soft whispering grew slightly louder, punctuated by a faint tap, like fingernails brushing along the edge of the counter. The night was supposed to be ordinary. That's how these things always begin, quiet, simple, nothing out of place. Just the kind of night where most people expect to sit down at a bar, order a drink, talk about their day, and go home without anything strange following them back. But sometimes in places where people gather after dark, the air feels a little heavier, like it's holding something it doesn't want to let go. Sometimes the people inside carry secrets. And sometimes the walls themselves seem to remember things you wish they didn't. I didn't plan on telling these stories. In fact, for a long time, I didn't want to talk about what happened. But whenever I walked past certain bars, even in broad daylight, I'd get that tight feeling in my chest, the same one I had on those nights. Something invisible would tug at me, reminding me of what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt lingering around me, long after closing time. That's why I'm sharing these disturbing true bar horror stories. Not to scare people for fun, but because they really happened. Because every person involved remembers the same cold details, the same strange tension in the air, the same sense that something unseen was watching from a corner no one dared to look at too long. And because even now, years later, there are moments when I wonder if the story actually ended, or if it's still waiting to finish itself. The first time I realized something was wrong happened on a rainy Friday night. The roads were slick, the kind of wet that makes the streetlights glow twice as bright. I wasn't even planning to go out, but a friend insisted we grab a drink before the week ended. I didn't want to disappoint him, so I agreed. We walked into the bar expecting laughter, warmth, and music. Instead, we stepped into silence so thick it felt almost unnatural. The place looked normal at first glance, soft lights hanging above the counter, a few empty stools, the quiet hum of an old refrigerator behind the bar. But there was something in the air, something still and heavy, like the room was holding its breath. My friend didn't seem to notice. He walked straight to the counter, shaking water from his hair, while I stayed frozen near the door, trying to understand why my instincts were suddenly screaming at me to leave. That feeling, subtle but sharp, was the same feeling each person in these stories described before things went wrong. Before the odd sounds began. Before the strange encounters. Before the moments that stuck with them long after they stepped outside into the night air. It's the kind of feeling you never forget no matter how much time passes. I looked around and that's when I noticed the bartender. He was standing at the far end of the counter, wiping a glass, staring at me as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. His eyes were tired, not unfriendly, but heavy in a way that didn't match his calm smile. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but low, like he didn't want to disturb something sleeping in the room. "Long night?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that was true. My friend ordered his drink, chatting casually, acting as though nothing was strange about the empty bar on a Friday night. But the bartender didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on me like he was waiting for something. Like he already knew I wasn't going to sit comfortably or pretend the air didn't feel off. We found a table near the wall. My friend talked about work, about the rain, about the plans for the weekend. But my mind kept drifting to the shadows near the back, where the light didn't reach. Every time I blinked, it felt like the shadows had shifted slightly, like someone, or something, was standing just beyond my sight. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination. But deep down I knew it wasn't. I didn't want to admit it, but there was something familiar about the bar. Not the layout, not the people, I'd never been there before. It was the atmosphere. The same heavy quietness I felt in the other stories I'd heard, the ones people whispered about but never told in full. Stories that always started with a simple night like this, in a bar that seemed ordinary until the moment something unexplainable happened. My friend excused himself to use the restroom, leaving me alone at the table. The room suddenly felt colder without him. I wrapped my hands around my drink, trying to ignore the way the shadows seemed to stretch a little farther across the floor. That's when the bartender walked over, his steps slow and careful, as if he didn't want to startle me. "You're not from around here," he said softly. That it wasn't a question. It was a statement. And the way he said it made something tighten inside my chest. "No," I replied. "Just visiting." He nodded slowly, then lowered his voice even more. "Most people who come in here aren't planning to stay long. They feel something. Same as you." I didn't know how to respond. His gaze drifted toward the back of the bar, where the darkest shadows rested against the wall. Something in the way he looked at that corner made my stomach twist. "Some places collect stories," he continued. "Not the good kind. The kind people don't want to believe. The kind they wish weren't true." Before I could ask what he meant, a soft noise came from the back. A faint shuffle, like someone moving slowly through the dimness. The bartender's jaw tightened. He turned away without another word and walked back to the counter, leaving me sitting alone, staring into the darkness where the sound had come from. My friend hadn't returned from the restroom yet. I checked the time, feeling uneasy. He wasn't the type to take long. The sound came again, just a little louder this time. A slow, dragging noise. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe another customer I hadn't noticed. Maybe a chair someone forgot to push in. Maybe the old floorboard settling. But the bartender heard it too. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened, in the way his hand froze halfway through wiping a glass. He didn't look up. He just kept wiping, staring down at the counter like he didn't want to acknowledge the sound. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the tension creeping through me. I knew the feeling too well. I had felt it in stories people shared in low voices, always at night, always after a few drinks gave them the courage to speak. Stories about bars that seemed normal during the day but turned strange after midnight. About visitors who felt watched. About employees who quit without giving a reason. About noises that didn't belong to any person still living. My friend finally came back, but something about him felt off. He didn't say much, didn't joke the way he usually did. He sat down slowly, glancing toward the back of the bar with a confused look, like he had heard something too but didn't want to admit it. "You okay?" I asked. He hesitated, eyes darting toward the shadowed corner again. "Did you hear anything?" he asked quietly. Before I could answer, the bartender's voice cut through the silence. "Not tonight," he muttered, barely loud enough to hear. The presence behind me shifted again, closer this time, brushing the air around my shoulders like it had mass, like it could push me if it wanted. My friend's grip tightened, his knuckles white. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, a deafening drum in the silence. The bartender stayed calm, or at least he tried, but I could see it in his eyes. A flash of something deeper, something he didn't want us to notice. Fear. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently, plunging the bar into near total darkness. I stumbled back a step, my friend almost falling on top of me. The shadows in the corner thickened, swirling, moving in ways that made no sense. The whispering returned, this time closer, sharper, like a voice trying to reach us, trying to warn or threaten. I couldn't tell which. "What the hell is happening?" my friend whispered, panic rising in his voice. The bartender's calm demeanor cracked for just a second. He exhaled sharply. "It's reacting," he said. "It knows you're here and it's testing you harder now." I swallowed hard, trying to make sense of it. The corner wasn't just dark, it was alive, moving, almost breathing. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The bartender's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the counter. That had never happened before. Something about this night, about our presence, had disturbed even him. Suddenly, a soft tapping echoed across the bar, but not from the corner this time. It came from the doorway behind us. My friend froze, his eyes wide. I turned slowly. The door hadn't been moved. No one had entered. And yet, the sound persisted, deliberate, insistent. "It's not just the corner anymore," the bartender said quietly, almost to himself. "It's spreading." My pulse quickened. The bar felt smaller, the walls closing in. The lights flickered again, and in that brief shadowed moment, I thought I saw a figure moving at the edge of my vision. Just a blur, impossible to focus on, but enough to make my stomach twist with dread. What do you mean spreading?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned closer, voice low and urgent. "Places like this, they absorb more than you think. Emotions, energy, pain. And some nights, when the wrong person walks in, or stays too long, the energy starts to shift. It grows restless." My friend's grip on my arm tightened even further. We didn't do anything. We just came in for a drink. The bartender shook his head slowly. It doesn't care. The bar decides who becomes part of its story. And tonight, you're part of it. A sudden clatter rang from the back of the room. Not the usual creak or tap. We were no longer dealing with small, subtle movements. Something heavy had been moved. Something deliberate. My eyes darted to the shadowed corner, but it had changed. The darkness had spread toward the center of the bar, almost reaching us, pushing the familiar shapes of tables and chairs into something unrecognizable. Then came the whispering again, louder this time, almost pleading. It felt like it was surrounding us, seeping into our ears, wrapping around the edges of our minds. And with it came a realization that made my stomach churn. It wasn't whispering words we could understand. It was mimicking us. The rhythm, the tone, the faint inflections of our own voices from earlier. My friend swallowed hard. It's imitating us? The bartender's eyes widened slightly. That's new. I've never seen it do that before. Not in decades. The presence shifted behind me again. I felt a pressure on my shoulders, on my back, as though something invisible was leaning on me. The whispering matched my heartbeat, quickening in perfect sync. I wanted to turn around, but instinct screamed no. Whatever it was, it didn't want us to confront it directly. And yet, everything in the room screamed that it wanted acknowledgement. Then the second twist hit. From the shadows came a voice I recognized, my own. Clear. Distinct. My words from earlier, repeated softly but urgently, as though something had plucked them from my mind and projected them into the room. My friend's jaw dropped. He stepped back, knocking over a chair, but the shadowy corner reacted instantly, pulsing, twisting, drawing the darkness closer. It knows what we're thinking, he whispered, panic rising. The bartender's lips tightened. More than that. It knows your fears. Your guilt. Every hesitation. And now, it's using them. The lights flickered again, longer this time, plunging the bar into darkness. When they returned, the shadow had moved closer to us, spilling into the center of the room. I could feel the air behind me grow heavier, almost solid. The whispering became insistent, overlapping with our own voices, repeating fears, doubts, regrets. The bar wasn't just alive, it was conscious, aware, feeding on the tension, escalating everything to a level I hadn't thought possible. My friend grabbed my arm. We have to leave, he shouted. I tried to stand, but my legs felt rooted. The air behind me shifted again, a subtle brush, a pressure that made me gasp. The shadows in the corner surged, stretching toward us like liquid ink, thick and unyielding. I could feel it reaching for the bartender too. His calm expression had vanished completely. Now he was tense, focused, almost afraid. You don't understand, he said, voice tight. It's not just here. It follows. It feeds. And now, it's seeing you react. There's no turning back. My friend grabbed my arm. We have to leave, he shouted. I tried to stand, but my legs felt rooted. The air behind me shifted again, a subtle brush, a pressure that made me gasp. The shadows in the corner surged, stretching toward us like liquid ink, thick and unyielding. I could feel it reaching for the bartender too. His calm expression had vanished completely. Now he was tense, focused, almost afraid. You don't understand, he said, voice tight. It's not just here. It follows. It feeds. And now, it's seeing you react. There's no turning back. A faint tapping began again, this time closer than before, circling around us, tracing the edges of the room. My heart raced. The whispering overlapped with our own voices, distorted, repeating, circling like a predator testing its prey. The shadows stretched even further, darkening the center of the room until it felt like the bar itself was a living entity, closing in. And then came the realization that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about the corner, or the bar, or even us. Whatever this presence was, it was learning, adapting, escalating. And it had no intention of stopping. The bartender leaned in, voice urgent. This is the part people don't survive. Most nights end before it reaches this point. But tonight, it's testing boundaries. Seeing how far it can go. And I think, his eyes flicked toward the darkness. I think it wants to pull the story forward, with us in it. My friend's face went pale. What do you mean, pull the story forward? Before the bartender could answer, the shadows surged again. The whispering became louder, overlapping, almost deafening. Our own words, our own thoughts, twisted and projected back at us in a way that made the room spin. The air behind me pressed harder, and I realized the bar wasn't just watching, it was interacting. It was forcing us into its narrative, into its story.